is doing. I hope everybody is doing well. It's early in the morning for you still. For me, it's late in the afternoon. So probably our energies are a little bit different. Everybody maybe still needs to sort of wake up a little bit. Let me see. Still waiting for few people to come into the meeting room. Hello, Cassie. So I guess we'll be, let me see, we'll need another 3 or so, but I always say this, I have already disabled the waiting room. So for whatever reason, if anything is not right, if you get kicked out of the meeting somehow, hopefully this won't happen now because I'm in Holland and the internet is great, but it can also be something from your side. So you can just come back in and there's no, I don't need to let you back in actually. So that's easy. I see something in the chat.
Just to interrupt really fast, John won't be here today, and I think because he has a conference today, and then also Danielle may not be here this morning, and so I think we have everybody.
Cool. Okay. Let me just make sure that everything is in the
I can't really get my camera to work.
I'm gonna mute everyone, and I think for now we can still be a little bit on the camera. I've got you all in gallery view, so I can see everyone. Yeah, before we start, let me just check one more thing. Yeah, this is all fine. Okay, so everybody should be here. Okay, well, first of all, welcome back. It's been it feels a little while ago, but I guess that's because we had that little break. Yeah, I hope you're all doing well and are happy, and that the training has been going well for you so far. I see some nods, some yeses, so that's good. Yes, and some thumbs up. Great. I actually first wanted to start to center ourselves by doing a little breathwork practice. And then we'll start with the lecture. And of course, I'll take some time for Q&A just in case if there's anything that you would like to ask or discuss before we start. Let me just see. Everybody is wishing Cassie well, I think. Cassie, you were ill, I guess, then. Oh, that's not nice to hear. Yes, I hope you're better. Okay, then I'm going to just bring you a little bit closer to the ground and my mat. And if you would like to do the same, you're welcome to, because I think it's nice if we all do this together. Let me just take this. So make your way onto your mat. Can you see me properly? Because the sun is coming right from this angle. I see some thumbs up. Otherwise, I might just lower this a little bit more, get a bit more shade. And then I'm maybe not so terribly lit up. So yes, please find a spot on the floor or on your mat, because it's a nice moment maybe to just before every lecture that I actually give, I like to give you a little bit of a like a centering, and that can be a little meditation, a little breath work, and that can really there are little tools that you can use for yourself. There are little tools that you can also use in your classes, of course. So I am very much fan of the next breath that we're going to do. It's called the 3-part Taoist Breath, and this one is actually sort of created or comes from Paul Grilley. But then Paul Grilley and Suzee Grilley, I don't know if you know them, they're quite famous yogis. They are ambassadors for a lot for yin yoga and adding like traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture to the yin practice. And they actually do a little bit more, I would say, active one because you're standing, and that is actually called the 4-part Taoist breath. But then Bernie Clark, who is also quite a famous yogi. He's a yin yoga teacher, and he called it the 3-part Taoist breath, and actually does it on the floor. So we'll do the other one also at some point, but this one is nice, especially if you are teaching more like slow flow, or you're more to the ground with whatever practice you're doing. It can also be for a more invigorating practice, but it's more like if you're starting low to the floor, then this could be nice, and especially if you're doing a yin class, then I also like to add this in general. This is very nice because it sort of synchronizes your breath and movement, and it sort of gets you to connect to your breath, and it just sort of centers the mind as well and the brain. So I've got some blocks here. As you can see, I'm sitting in sort of a Saisha style, hero style seat, Virasana, also called like that. I'm sitting with the fronts of my feet flat. So I don't know if you can actually see that, but the fronts of my feet are on the floor, so I'm not having my toes tucked under. And for some people this is not comfortable, so if it's not comfortable for you like this, then always remember that you can use props. You can use a block and just put it under your sitting bones, and maybe if the block is not high enough, that doesn't do much for you, and maybe you actually need 2 blocks. So you can also do that. You can also use a bolster. And if it's really, really not comfortable like this, then you can also sit in an easy cross-legged seat. So to start this breath, I always start with to ask the people to place their knees a little bit wider, and then to come forward so that you're sort of in a child's pose, Balasana, and that you can just feel for a moment as you're coming forward whether that is comfortable enough for you. Yeah, whether you need to have the knees a bit closer together or a little bit wider. So that's just to sort of figure out what is the right leg position. And we did that, maybe you remember also when we did a breath of joy, like when we have to fold forward, you want to be able to be comfortable there. So that's why we tried out the distance of the legs, the feet, as we were standing and then folding forward and experiencing how that is. So we do the same with this one, yeah? So then you can come back up to a straight spine. So you're just sitting on your heels, basically. And then maybe for a moment, just place your hands, one hand on top of the other hand, and close your eyes here. And as you close your eyes, you shut off the world around you, and start to bring the awareness inside your body. You can feel for a moment, does it feel nice with the right hand inside the left hand, or maybe you want to have it the other way around. The right side of the body is more our yang side of the body, the male side, the more active side. And the left side of the body is more the yin side, the more darker, quieter side, the female side. So you can feel also like what is more comfortable, and maybe energetically you can put some meaning to that. And maybe you feel like your female side has to be carried by your male side, for example, and then you can put your left hand inside your right hand. So with the eyes closed, the awareness inside your body, just start to observe your breath for a moment. Just noticing, how is your breath right now? Now, we're not trying to change anything just yet. But just observing the quality of the breath. Checking in with yourself for a moment. Where do you feel the movements that are created by the breath inside your body? Just becoming sensitive to the sensations that you feel as you're breathing in your natural rhythm. Now let's start to take some control of our breathing. So you're going to just elongate the length of the inhales and the length of the exhales slightly. And remember, breathing through the nose is in general the most healthy way to breathe. So try to really do this breath work, unless it's sort of stated otherwise. Do it through your nose, breathing in and out through the nose. And as you find a bit more length on the inhales and the exhales, try to feel whether you're just breathing towards the front of the chest, the front of the rib cage, or can you start to breathe a little bit more three-dynamically into all directions of the ribs, the rib cage. Breathing towards the side ribs as well as you inhale, and towards the shoulder blades, towards the belly. And on your exhale, just letting go of all the air. And I hope that you find that the moment you start to bring your awareness to your breath, at the moment you start to take some control over the breathing, that the mind becomes more quiet, the body becomes more relaxed. You're becoming more focused, more centered. So now just place the hands out of the lap next to your body. Fingertips are just sort of leaning onto the floor, if they can reach there. Otherwise, just let the hands hang next to the body. And then you're welcome to blink your eyes open, keep your gaze soft, maybe for the first few rounds. Besides listening to my cues, you might also want to just watch me as we do this breath together. You're also welcome to try just with the eyes closed. I'll try to cue as accurate, as detailed as possible for you to do the movement with me. So let's take a nice deep breath in all together. And a long exhale, breathing in and out through the nose. And then on the next inhalation, circle the arms up. You can look up, you can bring the hand palms all the way together. And then on the exhale, bring the hands behind the head and then start to press these invisible walls away. So you're pressing the hands out to the side. As you inhale, bring the hands back to the shoulders, open the heart, looking up towards the sky. And then on your exhale, you start to press your hands forward and round into the spine, pulling the navel in. Now turn the hand palms up. Inhaling again, you're going to reach the arms up all the way, looking up. And then as you exhale, you slowly surrender down into that sort of child's pose position. It's an ongoing movement. So as you inhale again, you start to circle the arms up again. You can look up, hand palms meet above the head. Exhaling, hands come behind the head, and then you start to press these invisible walls away. Yeah, so they're long inhales, long exhales. On the inhalation, hands come to the shoulders, opening into the heart space, looking up. Exhaling, pressing hands forward, round into the spine. Yeah, you can really pull the navel in. Hand palms up towards the sky. Inhale, reach the arms up. Slight back bend here, and on the exhale, surrendering down to the earth. Really round into the spine here. And then inhaling again, circle the arms. Exhale, hands behind the head, and then you press the invisible walls away. If you're ready for it, you can start to close your eyes if they're not closed yet. Inhaling, you bring the hands to the shoulders, open into the heart. Exhale, start to press your hands forward, round into the spine. Hand palms up towards the sky. Inhale, reach the arms up. A slight back bend here, and as you exhale, you fold forward, surrender down towards the ground. Let's do 2 more rounds, really consciously inhaling, circling the arms up. Exhale, press the walls away. Inhaling, hands to the shoulders, open the heart up towards the sky. Exhale, pressing hands forward, round into the spine. Hand palms up towards the sky. Inhale, reach the arms up. Back bend here. And on the exhale, slowly surrender down to the ground. 1 more, just like this. Inhaling, circling arms. Maybe you can close your eyes. Exhale, press those invisible walls away. Inhaling, hands to the shoulders, open the heart up. And on the exhale, press the hands forward, round into the spine. Hand palms up towards the sky. Inhale, reaching up. Opening into the chest, and on the exhale, surrendering down into that child's pose. And now you can choose, maybe you stay here with the eyes closed. Maybe you like to come back into your seat. Hands can be into your lap. Again, still with the eyes closed, and just feel for a moment. And slowly blinking your eyes open if you're still in your child's pose, slowly coming up to a straight spine. And then I hope you feel the effects. This is a really nice breath, also because it, as I already mentioned, it synchronizes breath and movement, and you become really conscious of the breath. But also it brings that nice movement into the spine, where rounding and arching, like hollowing and rounding. And that's always also really nice to warm up the spine for certain practices, specifically if you're doing like a heart opening yoga practice, or any what I said, any practice where you maybe stay low to the floor and it's a bit more of a slow flow. This is a little bit Tai Chi kind of movement also. So if you're into that, you can always bring that into your classes. Okay, then let's slowly make our way back to our computer, or however you want to be seated for the lecture. So, yes. And then before I will put myself on speaker view, so I still now see you in gallery view. So I just wanted to know if there's any questions, maybe any questions on the breath we just did, maybe any questions that came up during your break about anatomy, the things that we already spoke about. Anything, any comments? Or is everybody okay? I see some thumbs up. Okay, I have the feeling that there's no specific questions. That's great. And yes, the name of the breath work, it's called the 3-part Taoist Breath. And what I can do, I have like an instruction video from this for myself, and I can send that to you in the group. It's a YouTube link. So you can then watch it back with the instruction, and maybe you even want to write it out or something. So I will do that, or I might even just put it up on the page where you can watch the recorded sessions. Then you'll see that as an extra video there. Yeah, so I'll write it down. 3 parts Taoist breath. Okay. Well, then if there's no questions, then I am going to wait, I see another chat coming up. Yeah, so it's Paul Grilley, and then his wife is called Suzee Grilley. Suzee Grilley, and they actually came up with the 4-part Taoist breath, and I'll promise we'll do that another time. It's standing. And then this is the 3-part Taoist breath, and the 3-part Taoist breath, you could say, is sort of then developed from the 4 parts by Bernie Clark. Bernie Clark is also a very famous Yin yoga teacher. He's really my Yin guru, I call him. Okay. Then I am going to share my screen with you. And first, let me just put myself in speaker view. And I also will pin myself. And remember, I will come back to you any few sort of topics that I talk about to see if there's any questions. And also you can, of course, also always just write something in the chat if there is an urgent question or something. So let me see. Yes. Here we are. So I just wanted to do a really quick recap because it's been a little while back since our last session. And the last thing we spoke about are joints. Joints is the place in the body where 2 or more bones meet, and that's also the place in the body where there can be movement. And we spoke about where we have 3 types of joints. The type that we think about and the type that's important for us in yoga asana is the synovial joints. They are freely movable. Think about your elbow, think about the shoulder, the hip. They are synovial joints, freely movable. Then you have the fibrous joints that are immovable, like in your skull. The different bones in the skull are like sort of glued together, and there's no movement there. At least not after after I think we're 12 years old, something like that. Before that, it's still sort of growing, but after that, then it's completely immovable. And then we have the cartilaginous joints that they are partly movable. And I always think the best example is our rib cage. When you think about the ribs and how they connect, for example, to the sternum. So the sternum is right here and the ribs are connecting to it. You can imagine as we're breathing, there needs to be some movement. So I can't really do a lot with the ribs, but they are still moving a bit because the rib cage becomes bigger as we inhale and smaller as we exhale. So it's partly movable. Here you have the picture, and this picture is also in your manual, page 9. And then let's just dive straight into the synovial joints, the joints that we work with, of course, in yoga asana. So highly movable, we already spoke about this, that there is this sac around the joint that sort of seals it off. It closes it off, and the sac has, it's a joint capsule, and inside that there is a membrane, and that membrane has cells that secrete this synovial fluid, and the synovial fluid basically makes it that the articulation in the joint is smooth, and also that it's like a sort of a shock breaker, because it prevents also that the bones sort of hit each other. Then we have, of course, lots of ligaments around a joint. And at the end of the bones, when bones come together inside a joint, in general, there is this layer of cartilage. And that's also a sort of a padding and making sure that the articulation can be smooth. Sam raised a hand. Yes, Sam, let me just see if I can do that like this. That would actually, yes. Sam, can you unmute yourself and maybe just ask? Yeah.
Okay, I hope I don't want to take us off track here. I've just heard a lot of, I guess, conflicting information about synovial fluid. You know, things like sort of like it's cartilage in the sense that you can't create any more synovial fluid, and I think other people say that you can, your body, if you do the right exercises and eat the right things, you can create new synovial fluid. I have no clue what to think. Do you have any ideas about that? Like,
yeah, well, you know, it's always hard because there's always new research, and there are also, of course, probably different theories on the same thing. But I think it also depends a lot on where something is happening inside the body. So which joint, for example. Then it also depends on the person. But in general, synovial fluid also comes from the fluid that is in our blood. When you're younger, you can say we are more hydrated. So a joint won't dry up so quickly. As we're getting older, yes, we are dehydrating. So also the synovial fluid might dry up a bit, and you get, the movement is less smooth, so to say. As far as I know, and what I've learned is that, so cartilage is not the same as synovial fluid. Cartilage, they are specific cells, as of course a type of cell, and yes, they have not their own blood supply, so it's hard to heal them. Specifically, in some places, you hear once it's damaged there, it's really hard to regenerate. But there are practices that you can do, like for example with the knee, with the cartilage in the knee. There is a way where, with a sort of yin-like poses or a yin-like activity. It sounds weird to say activity because yin is not very active, but like putting pressure on the joint and then releasing, and then again putting pressure on the joint and releasing. That basically can restore or regenerate the cartilage. But then also there are some techniques, even where they inject something or they do something where they sort of can, so that you actually get more chance of that the cells will regenerate. The only thing is that, for example, in Holland, they only do that treatment until you're 45 years old. So it already says enough. At some point, you're over that age where they say that then the cells, they don't regenerate so well anymore.
Is that the PRP therapy?
To be honest, I have
with plasma.
Yes, I'm not 100% sure about this. I know a friend of mine is looking into it because she actually has a problem with her knee right now, and she's just on that edge of the age. I'm not really sure what the exact name is of the treatment, but I can look into it and let you know. But it's interesting, yeah, because a lot of people, of course, get problems with their knees, for example, as we grow older. So, but as far as I know, with the synovial fluid, I mean, I haven't really heard of an accident where all the synovial fluid from a joint was gone, so to say, but it might be, but I haven't heard that it's not, that it won't come back. The only thing is, what I know is that as you grow older, we dry up, and the body just has less fluids, and it means that it's also for the synovial fluid, of course, that also becomes more problematic to sort of refill a joint, if that makes sense. Yeah, so I think it really has to do with age, where in the body is it, so what kind of joint, and again, I know I talk a lot about yin yoga, but specifically for these kind of things, yin yoga is supposed to be really good, because we bring this pressure onto cells, the cells get stimulated, and then they are stimulated to work more, to work better. So there you can say, when you put this pressure on a joint, then also the cells that are secreting the synovial fluid will get stimulated to do more of that. Is that sort of an okay answer for you, Sam? Okay, cool. Okay, so just to come back to those synovial joints, we have a diversity of those joints. So they are different in also the movements that they can do. There are 6 types of synovial joints. You have this also in your book on page 9 and 10. It's a little bit of a different picture than this one. But so we have the plane and gliding joint. And that is not what's shown here. This is the bursa, or the disc that's in between the vertebra, but we are actually with the plane and gliding joint. We're talking about this little joint here. I hope that you can see my mouse indicator. So that sort of is that gliding. Bones are gliding one over the other. Just seeing if there's anything. Oh, yeah, sorry, I thought there was a message in the chat, but I see it, it's okay. Then we have the saddle joint. And that's, for example, the joint that we have at the base of our thumb. And as you can see, it has these movements, and you can also experience it with the thumb. It has the movements into all directions, basically. And the way that they are connected is a little bit like a saddle on the back of a horse. Then we have the hinge joint. A hinge joint is just like a hinge in the door. And think about your elbow, think about your knee. Basically, the only movement that's possible is just extension and flexion, extension and flexion. Yeah. Then we have the pivoting joint. And the pivoting joint is like your forearm. We have 2 bones in the forearm. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The radius and the ulna. And in this case, the radius can rotate around the ulna. The radius is on the side of your thumb, and it basically rotates around the ulna. That's what we call a pivoting joint. Then I think the ball and socket joint is sort of the most well-known. It's literally, we have a socket, we have the ball with the bone connected to it, and there is a lot of movement there. There we can really do all types of movement: abduction, adduction, internal rotation, external rotation, or calling it also medial and lateral rotation, extension and flexion and circumduction. So there's a lot of movement, and they are the shoulders, shoulder joint, and the hip joint. That is ball and socket. And then you have the ellipsoid joint, and that's how, like an example of that is where the skull here, just on the back of the skull, how it's connected to the first vertebrae, to the atlas. And yeah, that is also sort of specific movement is possible there. And they are the 6 joints that the 6 types of joints that we have. Now, what do we have inside our joints? And besides, we said it, you have a joint, it's sealed off with a joint capsule. And then that joint capsule on the inside secretes this synovial fluid. So yes, there is synovial fluid inside the joint, and that is lubricating the joint and making articulation movement smooth. It works a little bit like shock breakers, because the fluid, the synovial fluid, is not like water, so liquidy, it's more gel-like. And it really, yeah, it's like a little bit of cushioning basically. Then we have a bursa inside our joints as well, or around joints. And that's literally more like a little jelly bag, so to say. And it really works as a shock absorber as well. And as you can see in this picture, and you can see the different joints here, especially with the knee, for example, there are quite a lot there. And that's all to do to, avoid injury, to protect the joint from, also hard surfaces, and also just protection for like a hard impact. And then between our vertebrae, we have bursas also, but they are more like these discs. And I said that in the other on the other page. You could see that, but we'll also see it a bit later on when we talk about the spine. So you have the vertebrae in between the vertebral discs. There is this jelly-like disc. You can see it as like a little ball that's been sort of flattened out, and the outside layer is hard and the inside layer is more soft. And that's also, of course, for protection. You can imagine when we are standing, how the vertebrae lean on top of each other and how much pressure that is, and that it's good that there is something in between the vertebral body to protect basically from sort of the one bone hitting the other. And synovial fluid comes from the fluid in our blood. So as long as there is, that's how I would see it, as long as there is like enough fluid in our blood, as long as we hydrate well, then fluid from the blood can be moved into, transported also into the cells that then excrete that synovial fluid. So when we talk about head joints, no joint in the body sort of moves on its own. I mean, some joints can move on its own, but in general, especially when we're doing movement as asana, or walking or running or any exercise, joints, they basically form like a kinetic chain. They work together. The movement in one joint has an effect on the next joint and the next. So when you think about, for example, the hip, you have the hip, and when there is movement in the hip, and then with some yoga asana, in some postures, of course, there is straight away an effect on the knee joint, and then later on an effect on the ankle joint. They're in line with each other. And I hope that you understand that one joint really has an effect on the next, so to say, depending also on the movement that you're doing. So I wanted to know and see how you think about this. What happens when the hip, for example, is not open enough to do a posture which is fairly intense, like Padmasana, like lotus pose? And maybe you can write that for me in the chat. What will it affect, basically? Sam says he gets ankle pain. So you get ankle pain, Sam, when you do lotus. Cassie said it brings a lot of tension to the muscles, straining. Kanade says, I get knee pain when I come out. The sciatic nerve. Somebody says, I'm sorry, I just see a number, so I'm not sure who this is. Yeah, so we're talking about joints, right? So I'm going to keep the muscles for a moment and the nerve out of the question. But Carrie is also now talking about the knee and the ankle. Hi. Oh, that's good to know. Hi, Edith. I wasn't sure. So you can imagine, thanks for your answers, by the way. So you can imagine when you're doing a posture where you need to have a certain part of the body to be really open, then if you are not open enough there, then basically the pressure of the pose will go into the knee and then go into the ankle. So I can just, let me see, I might just stop sharing the screen for a moment. Yes, and I'll put you for a moment again. I'll lower my computer. So when you think about a pose like lotus pose, and you can do half lotus by just doing, of course, one leg, or you can do both. My femur bones, my upper thigh bones, my upper legs, they have to externally rotate, and they have to externally rotate in quite a deep way. So if normally, like say that you're sitting in an easy cross-legged seat and your knees are here, in general, that has to do with the hips not being open enough. So the hips are avoiding for the knees to come down. If you then want to bring yourself in a posture like a lotus pose, and here it is not open enough or not warmed up enough, then the moment you're gonna try to do it, then of course the pressure here, what you can't do here, is gonna continue into the knee and really bringing a lot of pressure on the knee, forcing something into the knee where the hip is not ready for it to do. So there can be pain here. And then also the next one in line would be the ankle. Yeah? So that's why I hear some of you wrote down like, oh, there can be knee pain, or oh, there can be ankle pain. Yeah, that's probably because the hip is either it's not open enough or wasn't warmed up properly. Yeah, so I just wanted to make that clear about joints, and there's of course more kinetic chains in the body like that. But yeah, you just want to be very careful and mindful when you're practicing yoga asana, to make sure that you don't force your body into anything that is not right. Like if the big movement in the body, which in this case would be you need open hips for that external rotation, if it's not good enough or not open enough, so to say, for the posture, then don't try to force yourself in it, because you'll put it on your knee and then on your ankle. Okay, let me see. I hope that was clear. I'm just going to share my screen with you again. Yes. Like this. I see there is something in the chat. Edith, you're saying, will someone be able to open? I don't know what you mean by that, if that is a question or is it for me? Otherwise, maybe write it out. I hope that, anyway, that's clear. And then from here, I actually want to start talking about the different joints in the body. Let me just see. Ah, okay. That's good, Edith. Thanks. Yeah, so let's start with the neck. And the neck, that's our cervical spine. It consists of 7 vertebrae. You can see that here. And we call them C1 to C7. C1 is the atlas. It's the carrier of the skull. It's the first one. And then the axis is the second one. And it's the atlas that actually can rotate on the axis. And that's why also we can have quite a lot of movement in our neck. So the movements of the neck is flexion, where we bring the chin towards the breastbone, the sternum. Extension, where we bring the back of the head backwards. We have lateral flexion to the sides, and then rotation. Yeah, so they are the movements of the neck, and I'll just take this off so you'll see a little bit better also later when we talk about shoulders and things. So here you can see how weirdly shaped the bones or the vertebrae are in the neck. We have a lot of irregularity and protruding parts, and a lot of places where, as you can see here, where basically the vertebrae can lean onto each other. It's almost like a game of Lego. And you can see here how they all sort of connect and come together. So maybe you can write it for me in the chat. Can you name a pose where we extend the neck? If you don't know the Sanskrit name, that's fine. If you don't know the name at all and you just want to show it, that's also fine. I can put us back on gallery view. So this is extension, where we bring the back of the head backwards. Yes, camel pose, bow pose, Ustrasana, camel, yeah. So in quite a bit of back bending postures, we are bringing extension into the neck. And then of course you want to be careful not to sort of just jam your neck backwards and just let the head sort of drop back, but you try to do it in a more controlled way, engaging muscles. So a good one here is always to, especially in the beginning, and especially if you're new to back bending or new to yoga, the skull weighs so heavy. So if we just drop the head back, that could really cause injury. So you want to do it more mindfully, and to look at the tip of the nose is always a good cue. Because we sort of keep on engaged more with the neck muscles like that. Friksasana, as in tree posture, can be depending on the variation. You can also look forward, and then sort of you can say the neck is neutral. Maybe you actually have your arms up and out, and you're looking up towards the sky. So yes, they are postures where we have the neck extended. Anywhere where we're opening also into the throat, basically. A question: in which pose do we need to be extra careful of the neck? Can you answer me in the chat? Halasana, yes. Plow pose, that is halasana. Of course, headstand, Edith, yes, also. I like it that you're already using your Sanskrit names. That's great. Here's Asana. Sam is saying, yeah. There's another one, very important. It's connected to Halasana, I would say. Yeah, Tasha's saying, any pose that involves the neck, you want to be careful with, of course. Yeah. Cassie is saying shoulder stand. Yes, exactly. Shoulder stand, shoulder stand. Yeah, the other ones are also saying that. Great. Yes. Any posture where there is a lot of pressure on the neck, like for example in Halasana, like for example Salamba Sarvangasana, which is shoulder stand. Yeah, there you want to be really careful because we're basically putting the weight on the neck. And I feel that with headstand, if you do it correctly, there is most of the pressure is on the arms and the shoulders, depending, of course, on the variation that you're doing. I mean, the variation that Sarah is working towards, where she has just her head on the floor and her arms a little bit out to the side. I think at some point she even wants to bring her hands away from the floor. Then that's, of course, a lot of pressure on the neck still. So you really have to be super, super strong and engaged also, and very mindful how to do that. But yeah, the important thing when you do a shoulder stand or a plow pose is because there is this weight on the neck. We can give some advice and we can give a cue so that people at least avoid injury. Have you got any idea what that could be? This is not a test. I'm just sort of seeing like what things come to mind. What do you know? Just wondering. Maybe you've heard it before. Yes, Sam, for plow pose or for shoulder stand. Yes, Tasha saying, yes, do not turn your head. Yes. So that's the most important thing. You don't turn your head. And I mean, some teachers do it. Like I am also sometimes explaining something, and because I know what I'm doing, I then tend to sort of turn my head sometimes to the students. But at the same time, you have to be mindful, because if I show it like that, then sometimes I'm also thinking I'm giving the wrong example because they feel maybe that it's okay to do it. So in general, you could say, don't turn your head, just look straight up, basically. And that's to protect the neck. And there's other things that you can do, of course, to protect the neck. And I'm sure that, yes, Sam, props, exactly. And they can give some sort of support. And yeah, I don't know if shoulder stand, of course, is in your sequence. I actually would like to see the sequence. I have to ask Sarah about that. But for if it is in your sequence, I'm sure that Sarah will also talk about props for usage for that. Okay, thank you for your answers. All great. And then let's continue. We talk about the shoulders, or are there any other questions about the neck? You can either raise your hand or you can write it in the chat if there are any questions. Say me something. Yeah, coming back from Ustrasana, I personally have to be extremely careful. Is that normal? Yes, I have that feeling as well. And therefore, what I do when I do a camel pose, I don't tend to let my head hang back all the way, because I feel I'm just not a supernatural backbender. Oh, let me see what else you say. It's dormant, hurts, but feels a lot of pressure. It doesn't hurt, but feels a lot of pressure. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know that feeling. I have it. I can have that too, especially when I let go of any engagement and just let the head hang. Sometimes it can be nice, but again, there is a lot of the weight of the head is a lot. So when you do that, and then to sort of start to engage again and bring the head up, that can be uncomfortable. And you have to be really like mindful on how to do that, to really sort of start to feel like, oh yeah, I'm starting to really engage the muscles again, and then do it. So if you feel like it's really not comfortable for you, then I suggest that you keep looking at your nose as you're bringing your head back, and it sort of keeps some sort of engagement in the muscles around the neck. And you just don't let the head, and if you see it from the side, you just don't let that head hang all the way like that. But I keep looking at my nose, and I'm still sort of engaging, and I'm not doing that. But there is like a little bit before I completely collapse back, I still sort of hold it. And I think especially if you're teaching beginners and you want to do a little bit more like difficult postures, like for example Ustrasana, then just build it up. So don't let them actually have their head sort of come back at all. They can almost sort of start the posture with sort of keep looking a little bit forward or a little bit sort of diagonally up, without having to have their head hang back. Because with a lot of back bending postures, a lot of people feel like they're really deep into the pose because they just jam their head back. But there's nothing happening in the back. There's nothing happening in the spine. It's all happening. They feel like, oh my God, I'm so deep into it, because they just sort of get it out of their neck. And again, there we're talking about that kinetic chain again. And it's the same thing when people do a twist. And actually, if you sort of keep your head, your nose in line with your sternum, and then see how far you twist, that is a whole different feeling than when you sort of try to jam your neck all the way back, because then you feel like, oh my God, I'm so deep into that twist. But actually, you're not really doing it with your torso, you're doing it with your neck more. So I feel that you want to be very careful and build it up. And the more experience you get with your practice, then you can feel the difference. Am I jamming it into the neck, or can I actually do this, if that makes sense? So I hope that was a clear answer for you. No more questions on the neck? No. Well, then I actually see that it is 9 a.m. So I'm just going to, let me see, like this. Yes. Just going to stop sharing. Put you on gallery view for a moment. Yes, so the time, it always goes so fast. I want to give you a little break, because then you can either jump up and down and wake up a little bit, or have a coffee or whatever. And it's 8:59, so let's meet at 9:05 then it is. Yes. 9:05. Yes. See you soon. Bye. Okay, and we are back. Just a short break this time. Okay. Yes, everybody's returning. Welcome back. Yeah, it looks a bit weird, doesn't it? It's actually tea, ginger, fresh ginger, and lemon. When I came back to Holland, I was sneezing a lot. So I was like, oh no, I hope I'm not getting like a flu or something. I'm not so afraid of COVID because I haven't really been around many people. Well, on the plane, yes, but after that, not. Now I realize that's why I'm drinking this tea. So like to make sure for my immune system. But now I realize that when I'm in Holland around this time of year, I always have hay fever. And that's why I'm sneezing all the time, because for the rest, I don't feel any like symptoms from having a cold or flu, but very annoying. Okay, everybody's back. So yeah, I'm going to continue. Any questions that came up? Yes, no, yes, no. No, I don't think so. Okay, then I'm gonna share my screen again. Where are we here? So yes, let us continue with the shoulder joints. Quite a complex joint, many bones together, or quite a few bones together. So there's 3 bones, and you can see it here in the picture. This is showing you from the back side, the posterior view. This is the anterior view, as if you were looking right through my rib cage. The shoulder joint is created by the humerus, the upper arm bone. It's created together with the shoulder blade and the clavicle. So the clavicle here, and then at the shoulder blade on the back. So you can say that the shoulder joint has the biggest range of motion of all joints. It's the same sort of a joint, or it's the same type of a joint as the hip bone. But when you take a really close look at this joint, and then you compare that with the hip bone, and of course we're getting to the hips later, you'll understand also why the shoulder joint has more range of motion. But now that you're just looking at the joint, is there anything, you can write it in the chat for a moment if you want, is there anything that sort of that surprises you when you look at it? Is there anything in the joint that you see, like where you can also imagine why the range of motion is so big? Let's see if anyone comes up with something. Look at the ball and socket. Yeah, Carrie is saying that the coracoid process can be, and that's this process, can be felt through the front of the chest wall. But for me, that I'm not sure if that really has to do with the biggest range of motion. Yes, it's held. Yeah, it's held together, of course, by ligaments. Yeah, the joint is a ball that moves a lot. But the reason why, and you can, even if you have your paper manual there of your the manual of the anatomy, you can go further a few pages and you can see the difference with the hip joint. Look at this super little socket. for this quite big ball, meaning that it is super shallow. And of course, there is a rim of cartilage around the socket, and it has to sort of a little bit more, it gives a little bit more stability. And we have, yes, we have a lot of ligaments. But yeah, it has a lot of range of motion, because it is not like a hip where it's completely, the ball is a lot more inside the socket. So I hope that that makes sense. That's why you will hear a lot easier that somebody pops, dislocates his shoulder, so the humerus bone pops out of the shoulder, and you don't hear that so many times of the hip. But we will also repeat this when we are talking about the hip joint, and then we'll see the difference. And it doesn't really have two sockets. It's one socket, but it's just it's a really shallow one, basically. Yeah, when you look at it, it's not like really like that the humerus bone is really like inside the socket and very sturdy. Katara is saying that she actually dislocated her shoulder, or that it dislocates, so it keeps on doing it. Yeah, some people have it in such a way, and it happens so many times that they actually have an operation. Yeah, my ex-boyfriend actually had that on both his shoulders. So just to get back to the joint, so it's called the acromioclavicular joint. And that's because the acromion process, here you see it from the back, you have the scapula, the shoulder blade, and on the shoulder blade you have this spine, and that spine that sort of has this protruding little piece of bone that sort of sticks out forward. That's what you will see right here. And that is the acromion process, and that's why it's called the acromioclavicular joint. And I'll show you the next slide. And here you can see, so this is the coracoid process. This is the acromion process that comes from that spine on the back of the shoulder blade, and this is then the humerus bone. But you can see how many ligaments there are that keep the bones together, and it's necessary also when you look at that ball and socket. And again, remember, there is this rim of cartilage around the socket to give it a little bit more of a feeling that the ball of the humerus can actually sort of go in there. But yeah, you need a lot of ligaments to keep the bones together. And actually, in general, you can say when a joint has a lot of ligaments, that actually also helps to make the range of motion of a joint bigger, because it's very stable because of all the ligaments, and then so it's safe to do all these different kinds of movements. So the movements that we can do with the shoulder, and I'll just walk a little bit backwards so that you can actually see that. So I'll do it from the side. This is flexion, because we're making the angle in the shoulder joint smaller. This is actually flexion, and bringing the arm backwards is extension. So when you actually say extend your arms up in a yoga class, that's actually not the right thing to say. You should actually say flex your arms up, or maybe it's easier than to say, if you're cueing something, raise your arms up. Right? Because in anatomical terms, this is extension and that is flexion. Then we can abduct, moving the limbs away from the midline. We can adduct, bringing the arms together towards the midline. Here I am abducting, and then again here I am adducting. So there's two movements there. I can internally rotate in the shoulder. I can externally rotate. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment. because we have the movement in the shoulder, but then it sort of feels like, and it's a little bit the same thing that I was saying with the neck before, like when you do a twist and you can only twist a little bit, but then you sort of really use your neck a lot. You have the feeling like, oh, wow, I'm really twisting really deeply, but actually it's just coming from the neck and not from the spine or not from the torso. And that's the same thing here when you're externally rotating in the shoulder, for example. You only do it to a certain degree, and then it's basically from the elbow downwards. The lower arm is where it's pivoting, and then it feels like if you look at the hand, you have the feeling like, whoa, I'm really externally rotating a lot, but it's only so much that you do with the shoulder, and then the rest is basically coming from the forearm. Same with internal rotation. Yeah, so we have this medial internal rotation, lateral rotation, and then we can also draw a circle, circumduction. It's sort of all the movements together, meaning flexion, extension, abduction, and adduction. Internal and external rotation makes it sort of circumduction. Yes, then we have the movements of the shoulder blades, and of course we have already sort of spoken about this when we were talking in the beginning about the different movements the body can do. But just to give a little recap, and let me just put my hair up for you for a moment. That probably makes sense. So the shoulder blades, I hope that you can see them on my under my top. And we can either elevate, so we're lifting up, shoulders up towards the ears. We can depress, like pressing them down. So elevation, depression. And then we can protract, where we actually bring the shoulder blades away from each other. So I'm rounding in the upper back. And we can retract. And here I try to bring the shoulder blades together as much as possible. So protraction, retraction, elevation, and depression. And then I said this before also, the shoulder blades, they don't just move up and down just like that. You have a little bit of that sort of swaying happening. I see a question. You mean with hyperflexibility in the elbow? Is that what you mean? Like when it's like overly, like for me, this is fairly straight. I would say I'm fairly average, but some people have like their arm more going downwards, the lower arm. Is that what you mean?
Like when I'm on the down dog, if I don't engage my forearm muscle, my arm, like this part of my elbow can go all around. Let's see. So it will go from this rotation with my palm on the ground. And I used to do my plank pose, chaturanga was impossible from here because I have to rotate my arm first to go down. I come back and all rotates inward, and I was not sure if it's like I don't know what this is. I do see some students doing plank pose this way. It's just like probably very not safe for your elbow, but I'm not sure what's causing, what joint is causing that.
I have the feeling that is coming more from your radius and ulna rotation than from the shoulder somehow. Like how I look at it from you, I have the feeling that, but it can also be maybe a little bit of both, but I have the feeling that you're overly sort of flexible or like very smooth in that rotation. A good thing I think there is to cue the triceps down to the mat when you're in down dog. It also really helps when you are in down dog and you start to turn the triceps down towards the mat. It also broadens more sort of the back of the shoulder, so that it can be a nice feeling. But I have the feeling that that also might be helping with that as well. Double jointed. Not sure about that. What do you mean with that, Tasha? You might want to unmute yourself for a moment and speak, maybe. Or is that a phrase that you use? Double jointed. Hi. I see your speaker's not working.
It's Jane. It is a phrase. It's an American phrase. And so if somebody could overextend a joint, or maybe they could make a joint pop, or maybe they could take the joint beyond a normal range of movement.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we are going to really talk about like hyperextension versus hypermobility. So we will still talk about that. I feel that Kanade, in your case, yeah, you're just like if you're not contracting, you're easily rotating there, and I would definitely be careful. I would definitely be a little bit aware of that, so that you're not, because you tend to then just do it in a way so that you hang in your joints, and what you want is to engage into the muscles to create activity. Yeah? Okay. I think, Tasha, maybe that's very American saying. I have not double jointed. I've not heard of it before. Okay. And it could be that we do have something similar, but maybe in a little bit of a different saying. Anyway, so the movements of the shoulder blades, that's we spoke about that. And then now I'd like to actually talk a little bit about the combination of movements. Because nothing is just a singular movement, first of all, and especially with some joints, a movement is created by various bones being involved, basically. So when you're thinking about, for example, the shoulder as just movement in the upper arm, then that's not really helpful, because in general, the movement that you do with your upper arm in the shoulder socket, of course, has an effect on the clavicle. It has an effect on the shoulder blade. Yeah, so there are more bones involved in a movement of upper arm in shoulder socket. And it also depends a little bit on the shape of the bones of a person. The shape of the bones define also the range of motion actually that is possible. But I will talk about that in a little bit later. But anyway, we need to move certain bones together to actually be able to create a certain movement. So when you think about, and I'll just make my screen a little bit bigger again, so for the recording. When we're talking about flexion of the shoulder, and you can actually try this with me, you can also try it with me with just placing your hand onto your shoulder. Keep pressing the shoulder down so that sort of the shoulder doesn't move up, no elevation, and then start to flex your shoulder. You probably only get to a certain way, to a certain height. And then at some point you will need to let go of the hand to be able to keep on flexing. So in this case, in general, when we flex the shoulder, there's also elevation of the shoulder blade happening. The clavicle is also moving upward and a bit inward. When we are extending the shoulder, there's probably a little bit of depression helping, or I should say, when we're extending the humerus in the shoulder joint, there is actually the clavicle is coming a bit more forward and the shoulder blade is a little bit depressed. And the same is when we do medial internal rotation or we do external rotation. You can do it to a certain degree without moving the shoulder blades. But the moment I want to do it more, you can see I start to internally rotate a lot, meaning that I also start to protract the shoulder blades. As I am opening my chest and I start to externally rotate my shoulders, the humerus in the shoulder socket, I'm also bringing the shoulder blades closer together, which is retraction. Yeah, so in general, you can say—
Can I say something?
Yes.
Jane, I just want to say, I think this is such a beautiful and very important point to impress upon teachers, which is that the movements to execute to get into a posture are often slightly different than the actions we want somebody to be taking once they're in the posture. And so many students do the movements necessary to get into the posture, and then because they don't know any better, they hold those positions. And if the teacher isn't looking, they aren't able to see that that student now needs refinement cues. And that's really the importance of looking at your students and executing refinement cues once they're in a posture, I think.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Because with a lot of things, but no, let me not, let's see for the next few slides, and then I'll have a question for you, and then we can talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, I definitely agree with that. So where movement is a combination of different bones being involved, different joints being involved. And then once you're in the posture, then refinement cues of what could you do once you're in the pose to actually explore the full, the full benefits of the posture, and also the full engagement in muscles. Because a lot of people also tend to come into a posture and then sort of relax into it, and then many times during a practice I also say, like, oh, this is we're not like resting now in the pose, but you can always keep on working to activate also a certain alignment in the body, but also activate, of course, the muscles and keep being engaged. So I hope that that's clear about the different bones that work together to create a certain movement. Then, for example, yes, here I wanted to ask this. When you look at the shoulder joint, and you can see that also on page 12 in your book, and what we've just also been talking about, have you got any idea what could limit the range of motion of the shoulder? And I guess there's multiple answers to that, but let's see if anyone sort of gets the thing that I'm looking for right now. And to make it a bit easier, let's talk specifically about flexion. When you look at the shoulder joint, what could limit the range of motion? And we have to look at the shape of the bones. Carrie is saying a broken clavicle. Yeah, I'm hopefully, of course, anything that's broken or anything that's injured, that will also limit the range of motion, but I wasn't really thinking of that. Canada is saying a ligament. In a sense, of course, a ligament, especially, yeah, and also like a joint capsule, if there hasn't been a lot of movement, if you, for example, had a broken arm for a long time and you had your arm in a cast and in a, how do you say, like in a sleeve or something, and you weren't moving your arm, then a frozen shoulder is actually that, is where ligaments have become really tight. I'm thinking more of joint, of bone shapes here, just to give you a little hint. And I know this is not an easy question. Let me see if I can go back. Oh, no, I can actually look at this. When you look at this, we have two different shoulder blades here. And this is also, again, saying how different the body can be. Remember that. We're all built differently, so our practice also, because of that, can be differently. Yes, Carrie is now saying a larger acromion process. So here we have the acromion process. You can definitely see the difference between these two, right? There is, this one is much larger, and it's like this little roof that sort of is over the humerus. And here, the humerus has much more freedom, so to say. Yeah? The humerus would be right here, if you look at my mouse indicator. So you can imagine if you have that roof and it's sort of over the humerus, and in this case, let's see what you think. When you're talking about abduction, which person has more range of motion here? Is it the right one or the left one? Just seeing if anything comes in to the chat. The left one. Sam says the right one. Edith says the right one. So I said, who has more range of motion when we're abducting? So if you have that roof over that humerus, maybe I stop here, because the humerus bone is literally going to hit that roof. It's literally bone on bone compression. Of course, there are probably some tissues in between there, some cells, and maybe a little bit of muscular tissue. But yes, you can imagine, because it's, and I'm exaggerating now, but it's really like over the humerus. So the humerus gets stopped. You can work around it, maybe going towards the back or maybe towards the front, and then you get a little bit more of that range of motion. But the one that's on the left, and that's the little roof, the acromion process is much more sort of backwards and upwards. So that person gets stopped here. Yeah, so that is what could limit our range of motion. And it can also be from the side. If the acromion process is quite a lot sort of forward, you'll notice that maybe somebody can't flex their arm any more than here. And for others, maybe they come all the way there. The person that gets stopped here because there is this compression on this side, on the front of the shoulder, and it's really annoying them and hurting them, they could go around it by bringing the arm around the acromion process, and then they can flex a lot. So I hope that that makes sense. And now I want to go back. So what happens if we are in down dog and we can't actually flex so much, if there is this pinching because there is compression? What do you think would we see? Any ideas on that? What would we see in the arms? Yeah, Cassie is saying there could be a lot of arching in the upper spine. That could be the case. If we're thinking about, we want to sort of work around it. So if if they're just the arm forward is going to stop them here. So they either have a down dog where there is not so much like a triangle shape, but it will be a little bit in like there will be sort of 3 angles happening. But if somebody can work around it by bringing the arm to the outside, meaning that they'll bend into the elbow, you'll get to see down dogs like this. And then who are we as a teacher if we only think very straight line and just think like the arm should be straight? And we have to realize that for some people, because of the shape of their bones, it is just not possible. So we don't want to sort of start and give a physical adjustment by sort of trying to push their elbows in or sort of create some kind of rotation and bring it in, because the elbow has to do this in order for the shoulder to feel okay. Yeah, so I'm just sort of getting you to understand a little bit about the difference in bones, in bodies, and that therefore it can be that somebody is in your class is sloppy and not working hard enough, and that's why they're sort of getting their elbows out or maybe they don't understand the alignment. It could be the case, but it could also be the case that it's just someone that the shape of their bones isn't allowing for them to have their arms completely straight in down dog. So always please be very mindful of how you approach a student in that sense, and just ask where do they feel it, and that will give you a lot of knowledge on like what's going on. But that's another topic where we'll talk about later. We're going to really dive into that also. I'm just looking at the chat. Yes, thank you. Yeah, Tara, yeah. Yeah, so it really all has to do with the shape of our bones. So also just a little question here on what we said before about and what could limit the range of motion, and also that different joints or different bones are involved in some movements in the shoulders. So what are our thoughts on the cue, keep your shoulders away from your ears in specific poses, like for example, Utkatasana chair pose or Warrior One. And I'll just stop sharing for a moment. Let me see. Yes. I'll just, so maybe if you have an idea, you can write it in the chat, or if you have an opinion. Canada is saying that's always hard for me. Yeah. So would you cue that yourself then? That is the question. Yeah, Canada is saying wide an arm help. Yeah, I second that. Yeah, so for many people, you can imagine, let me just make sure that you can see me completely. So for a lot of people, if you have that limited range of motion here, and you're doing a posture where you actually want to raise up the arms more, yeah, they have a problem here. So yes, their arms need to either go more out to the side, but also when you think about that movement that we said, like once you start to flex your arms in general, the shoulder blade will elevate. For most people, that's just a natural movement. So I guess it's also sometimes about how you cue things, because yes, the energetic movement could be to try to keep some space between the ears and the shoulders, meaning that you're not sort of trying to crunch your shoulders completely up and creating tension. That is something completely different from raising the arms up, but still having a little bit of that elevation in the shoulders, because that's just what suits your body. And yes, sometimes it needs to be arms wider. That's why also sometimes people, you know, a lot of people, of course, in these postures also have their hands together, like in a chair posture. And if you see that they're like that, and it depends a little bit whether you're doing rocket or ashtanga, or if it's more hatha yoga, you have different variations, of course, also of the chair pose. I'm mostly doing it more like this. So there's already that diagonal happening in the spine or in my torso, and the arms are not like overly like raised up. But of course, if you see people that want to bring their hands together, they're really desperately trying to bring their hands together, but you see that they're like really crunching up here, then for me, that is a reason to say, hey, bring the arms apart. And then you can see, they are actually relaxing more into the shoulders. So the shoulders can depress away from the ears. It's still probably a little bit elevated because that is the way that the shoulder joint moves when all the bones work together. But so I think this has to do a little bit also with what Sarah was saying. You take a certain range of, you take a certain movements to get to somewhere. And then once you're there, it can be also like a more energetic cue or movement. And maybe it's something that you don't even see from the outside, but you try to, for example, when the arms are raised, if somebody is like this, you really see like they're creating tension. Then it doesn't mean that they completely have to lower the shoulders away from the ears to a moment where it actually becomes really painful because it's compressing them. But you can still sort of relax the shoulders or like engage actually into the shoulders to bring them a little bit more down from the ears by not over tensing, basically. Yeah, so I hope that makes sense. Let me just see what I see in the chat. Oh yeah, wow, yeah.
The self-reflection this week for the humanities is about non-stealing and the physical body. I kind of made reference to it in our online session. It's so easily stealing from other parts when one part is damaged or something like that. So when we learn these energetic cues, we're not just helping the physical body, but like Jane is saying, we're really speaking to the energetic body.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's beautiful. That's a nice little bridge. Okay, just quickly going into gallery view. Let me see. Is everything clear so far? What I'm explaining? Great, okay. Then I am going back to sharing my screen with you. Yes. So I think anyway that these pictures are amazing to see because you get such a good idea on how different one's body can be. These pictures are for free, downloadable. They're all on Paul Grilley's website. Anybody that wants the link, let me know, or you can literally just Google Paul Grilley and bones and you will get to his website. But you will see the pictures as we go through all the different joints anyway that we're talking about and bones. Next one, also very interesting here. And so this is the acromion process. You can see that roof. So when we're talking about flexion in the arm, which person here has the least range of motion? Which person has the most little range of motion in flexing the arm? Sam says the right one. Yes, bingo. Yeah, great. I just like to ask these questions so to see whether you like get it, you know, it's yeah. So you see this and then you can think, yeah. So the right side. Yeah, because the here you can see that that the chromium process is so much more protruding forward than here and here. So by bringing up the arm, that it will hit probably here already, and for the others here. Okay, great. Again, a question for you, 2 questions. Please, can you name a pose where we protract the shoulders? Protraction, rounding a bit. Yeah, we're bringing the shoulder blades away from each other. In warrior, which warrior? Katara, which warrior are you thinking about? Tasha, drinking bird. Not too sure about those 2 actually. Cat, yes. Warrior 2. For me, not specifically. I mean, we are, because we're spreading the arms, but you still sort of want to have an open chest. Benjamin, yes, in plank pose, yes. Any other postures you can think of? So for example, this is prayer arms behind your back. There you're actually retracting. Let me think. Yeah, you're trying. Well, it is like, how do you get into the posture? And that's also what Sarah means, like you get into the posture by doing certain movements on the entry. And then as you're back into it, the energetic idea is, of course, to open into the chest and actually try to bring the shoulder blades more together. So that's also like, how do you come into a posture, and then what you do as you're in it. In your down dog, yes, I could say, but then also again, you're trying then at some point energetically, once you're in it, to bring the shoulder blades nicely, sort of neutral, I would say, on the back. Eagle pose, definitely protracting. We're really rounding in the upper back. And I don't know if it's something that's in your practice or in your sequence, but let's think about, autumn rabbit pose. Yes, Sasangasana for sure also. But think about postures like, for example, a crow pose, Kakasana. Because they're actually really helpful cues when you can cue somebody to round more in their upper back as you're in crow and you're looking forward instead of looking down, because a lot of people tend to look down. When you look down, we always say, like, where you look is where you go. So with crow, also look forward. It helps a lot. Try it next time if it's in your practice. And also rounding the upper back really helps. And that's the same when you're coming into a headstand. When you're coming into a Pincha Mayurasana, like a forearm stand, you are rounding. You are rounding in your shoulders. It's up on the entry. And then as you're in there, then energetically, you're trying to, of course, bring it more neutral. Yeah, so that's the protraction. And what about the retraction? Can you name some postures or maybe like a group of poses where you in general are retracting your shoulders? Tadasana, cow, Ustrasana, yes. So camel. Chaturanga, yes. So basically, we have those shoulders together in a lot of poses where we do a back bend. So Ben is also saying now wheel, yes. A cobra, an upward facing dog, Urdhva Mukha Svanasana, all those kind of postures. That is where we are bringing the shoulder blades together. We want that open chest. Yes, and humble warrior, of course, we interlace our fingers behind our back, and definitely on the entry, yes, I would say as we're coming forward, I'm just giving it a little try. Yeah, I guess it's still, yeah. That's still like really like a retraction of the shoulders. Nice, okay, good. So you get the idea, that's great to see. Then let's continue with the arm and the hand. So this is the shoulder joint we just looked at. That also big protruding coracoid process, the acromion process right here, the clavicle, that shoulder blade, the humerus, and then the humerus connects to two bones in the forearm. We have the radius and the ulna. So it's the ulna that's on the pinky side. The ulna, you can see that, of course, here also. It's on the side of the pinky finger. And it's the radius that's on the side of the thumb. And the ulna is what creates the elbow joint, so to say. You will feel, when you feel that big protruding bone, that is your ulna. And the radius rotates around the ulna. Then you have a lot of bones in sort of in the wrist and the beginning of the hand. They are called the carpals. And then you have the metacarpals that are right here. Those long bones here. And then you have the phalanges, which are the fingers. As you can see, with the wrists here, we have this sort of 8 little bones. I think it's around 8 bones. Yeah, they're tiny bones. So we really have to be careful with the wrist, especially when you start to do a lot of leaning on the wrist in certain postures. Then, and of course, especially also with Vinyasa yoga, we do that a lot with rocket. When you start to do crow poses and handstands, and yeah, any like also down dog, especially you'll notice that in beginning, I find also when I get beginners to my yoga classes, that for them in the beginning, it's so hard to lean on the wrist the whole time. So that's why I always like to do quite a bit of wrist warm up. And every yoga style is a bit different with that. But for me, I find it's very important. And also, yeah, you just want to be careful because you don't want to break any of those little bones. Then the movements that we can do. So with the elbow, I just said it before, it's a hinge joint. So there's literally just that flexion and extension. Flexion joint, the angle of the joint becomes smaller. Extension is where it becomes bigger. And then the 2 forearm bones, the radius can turn around the ulna. So we have that rotation happening. And I remember we were talking about this, I think it was maybe in our first session already, about that, of course, when you think about the arm, I remember that you can do a certain thing with, like, for example, your shoulder joint, but then you could do the opposite with the joint a bit further down. So in this case, for example, where I wanted to go to is to say, like, yeah, with a lot of postures, we have this external rotation actually happening in, I'll make my screen a bit bigger so that you can see me better. But there is this external rotation happening in the shoulder, but I'm doing external rotation here, and then I'm internally rotating the forearm. So they can be separate movements. And that's why sometimes when you're just looking at the hand, it doesn't say enough of what's going on in the shoulder. Remember when we were talking about the internal and the external rotation? So anatomical position, my hands are forward. If I try not to move anything with my hands, and I just do it from the shoulders, this would be internal rotation, and that's external rotation. And I can also do more of that with my forearms. So I'm externally rotating more now from the sort of the elbow down. And when I do internal rotation, I can do more from the elbow down with my hands. That's the supination and the pronation. From the side, internal rotation, external rotation. When my arms are up, external rotation, internal rotation. It's very hard to see, I guess, when the arms are up, but just to see, like, if you understand in what pose we're doing this, for example, in which pose are we externally rotating in the shoulders, but at the same time we're internally rotating the forearm? Can you name a pose for me? Down dog, Cassie says, yes. That is the most important one, I would say, where we really have to sort of think about, okay, what's going on in the joints, because it's a nice, when we really feel it and understand it, then it's also nice for us that we can give these specific cues to our students to get more refinement into the posture, basically. And there is another posture where we also, for example, do this, and that is when you're doing a forearm stand, for example. Or in dolphin. And so a lot of postures where we have the hands flat on the floor, there has to be, in general, a different rotation happening here in the lower arm, the forearm, than in the shoulder. Yeah, so I hope, because I remember that was something that we were talking about at that time, and it was a bit unclear, maybe, like, how does that work? So I hope that is clear now. Cassie is saying with plow, also with halasana. Yeah, if you have the hands sort of down onto the ground, depending, and then of course, or in your back, holding your back. Let me think. External rotation. Well, it depends what you're doing. If you're placing your hands on the floor, then yes, that's internal rotation. Depending, some people also tend to hold the hands on their back, and then it's internal rotation. Oh, and I just think that now, I hope you can still hear me. My AirPods, just the battery, I think, is gone. Let me see. Yes, this is perfect timing. We are at the end of our session, and I am ready next time then to talk about the spine. So let me just get, let me see, I'm just stopping sharing first and get you on gallery view. Yes. Can you still hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, great. Yeah, sometimes I think my AirPods, then the battery is down, but some still, yeah, you can hopefully still just hear me. That's good. Okay, any questions on this, on the last sort of things that we spoke about? It's already time, but maybe we still have a few more minutes if anybody has a specific question. No, I think it's all fairly clear then, and maybe some things maybe sort of it needs to sort of settle in, and then maybe the question comes a bit later. So remember, you're welcome to either text me or write your question down, and we can talk about it next week. Next week, now I was in Loosdrecht in Holland, and next week I will be in London. So I'm taking you all over the world. Thank you very much. I wish you a beautiful day today, and tomorrow you have, of course, a nice busy program on your teacher training. And yeah, just wishing you lots of luck, and let me know if anything occurs, if there's any questions. Again, you're welcome to text me, and otherwise we will see each other next week. So thank you very much. Enjoy your day, and see you soon.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you. Bye-bye.